Images from the unblinking, unseeing electronic eye, television, arrived in North Dakota on Easter Sunday, 1953. Whatever the symbolism inherent in that coincidence, the event had great implications for North Dakota, for what it brought to the state and its people, and for the way it became an integral part of everyday life.
The ultimate future of television cannot be foretold at this time, but you can rest assured we will strive to bring you the best in television as we have endeavored to do in radio. In those early days, reception by listeners as far away as Minokan was considered quite wonderful. There will be the same thrill in hearing from distant TV viewers now. And just as radio has spread out so that KFYR now reaches beyond the borders, perhaps someday television, too, will reach more and more of this great area.
From the beginning, television was different from other media. This was a visual form, not unlike the movies, where demonstrating and showing were most successful. This was the medium of moving images, brought conveniently into living rooms across North Dakota, as was already happening in cities and states elsewhere.
We know that television has been very prevalent throughout the United States. But now, with this inaugural program over KFYR TV, we're going to have entertainment right here in our own community, in our own homes, and believe me, we say thank you to the principals here at KFYR.
Hi, folks. As our part of the evening's entertainment, we'd like to do a number that features our steel guitar player on a thing called Stealin' the Blues.
Now, one screen or even half a dozen screens aren't enough. You need enough to screen out all interference. In this RCA Victor television set, there are actually 28 tuned circuits. No other make of television has more. Few have as many. That's one reason why you can be sure.
This was the new electronic gadget of the day for Americans, magical and mesmerizing from the moment it entered the public mind. It was the technology of radio extended by pictures.
So here's what old people, I think, will sing, I Want a Girl. Now, I want a girl, just like the girl that married my dear old papa. Oh, she was a pearl, and she was the only girl that Papa ever had. A good old-fashioned girl with heart so true, and one who loved nobody else but just my Papa. So, I want a girl, just like the girl that married my dear old Papa. I want a girl, just like the girl that married dear old Papa. She was the pearl, and she was the only girl that Papa ever had. She was a sweetheart that kid, a good old.
Precious little remains of the entertainment on local TV in the 1950s, most of it having been performed live.
Just Papa. Hey, but the girl, just like the girl that married dear old Papa, Papa, Papa. She was so sweet.
However, there exists a sizable film record of news events witnessed by North Dakota's first TV news reporters and film cameramen. Usually former radio and wire service reporters and newspaper photographers, they were called upon to integrate tools of the printed press, the teletype, and the wire photo machine with the emerging technology of TV.
We're learning a whole new industry here at KFYR TV in order to bring you the pictures. Now, all of our pictures here at KFYR will not be produced with a live TV camera. In many cases, it will be impossible to give you programs live. So we have many other types of cameras here. This is the standard newsreel man's camera for bringing you newsreels of events such as fires, train wrecks, things of that sort. As they occur, we will use the newsreel camera. It carries no sound. We also have sound on film cameras for filming speeches and things of that sort where sound is necessary. In addition, we have still cameras. All television pictures do not move. In some cases, it's neither practical nor possible to take motion pictures, so we have the standard newsman's speed graphic camera here at the KFYR photo department. We also use the small, compact type of camera used by magazine photographers for use in places where portability is important. And we have the very small cameras for making slides, doing copies of commercial advertisements and so forth. We have many new things here at KFYR TV in order to ensure you the most interesting picture at all times. We hope you'll enjoy the programs we produce here in the KFYR photo department, as well as the programs we receive from the various networks.
North Dakota TV pictures show a state changing and modernizing in the 1950s. When the decade opened, North Dakota was largely an economic backwater, a place tied inextricably to agriculture. The state had no major industrial operations, could provide few job opportunities for its young people, and generally funded few of the social and human services that yielded a higher quality of life. The dawn of the 50s, however, did not find an unchanging state without hope for its future. The renewal of agriculture during and after World War II had generated a prosperity unmatched in state history. The initiation of construction of the Garrison Dam on the Missouri River heralded new possibilities. Change, or at least the realization of some long-sought dreams, was already evident, and most observers realized more was on the way.
But the nonpartisan league is a nonpartisan league. We don't have any provisions in our bylaws, in our Constitution, for merge conventions with a political party. We don't have anything of the kind.
Nowhere was the change in North Dakota brought about during the 50s more evident than in politics. The decade saw the return of two-party politics after an absence of more than 4 decades. Leading the way was the arrival of a new generation of state leaders. Of primary importance was the consolidation of the nonpartisan league with the Democratic Party. The changeover occurred in 1956 when the liberal-dominated NPL convention voted to run its candidates in the Democratic column rather than in the Republican column, as they had for decades. The move had little immediate effect. Most of the major figures in the NPL, including its longtime leader, Senator William Langer, and U.S. Congressman Usher Burdick, refused to switch. But portents for the future could be seen in election results, as the new coalition drew 40,000 more votes together in a losing effort than the Democratic Party alone had 2 years earlier. The increase held firm in 1958, when the new party elected the first Democratic NPL congressman in the state's history. Hours of uncertainty preceded confirmation of Quentin Burdick's victory. When it was clear that he had won, the state's new political star was quick to point out what it meant.
Yesterday, history was made in North Dakota. My election to the Congress is a landmark in North Dakota politics. I do not consider it a personal triumph, however. I consider it a victory for the nonpartisan league in the Democratic Party and the state of North Dakota. We have now firmly established a two-party system, and that is good. Hereafter, the Democratic candidates and the Republican candidates will pay more attention to the voters and to the state of North Dakota.
As a rule, state leaders either adapted poorly or well to television. This new medium necessitated a totally different persona than did the traditional news outlets of newspaper and radio. Older, established figures were generally mystified by the medium, unable to turn it to advantage.
Mr. Anderson, what are the issues that will divide you from Mr. Wenzel in this primary campaign?
Well, I expect there will be issues, but at the present time, of course, I am not ready to say what they may be.
You are not willing to say what they might be.
There was a fear of the camera, and a lot of times you could sit down and talk over things and think you would get a pretty darn good interview, and as soon as the lights and the camera went on, people would freeze up. They were afraid to express themselves.
When they were warming up political rallies or meetings or things like that, the lights were off in order to save bulbs and heat and so forth. And when they popped on, boy, I mean, the lights almost had a magical effect on people, because, I mean, it was just ooh and ah and so forth, because the cameras were going to start rolling.
One politician of the 50s knew about crowds. North Dakota's political legend is GOP Senator William Langer. A fiery, evocative, charismatic stump speaker endowed with a strong voice, Langer was capable of ignoring the intrusive lights and camera.
Get all the money you can from the tidal and oil barons, from the railroad and banking and grain profiteers, and from all those other pirates who have no sense of shame or decency or honesty. Gather them together, you ROC organization. Gather them together with all their contemptible local propaganda. And the nonpartisan league will meet you at the polls next June. Meet you and whip you. Meet you and whip you, as we have done every time.
For Langer, TV posed a different problem. He was at the peak of his powers when TV arrived. Its unfeeling eye watched his physical decline, the result of chronic diabetes and failing health. A hollow, shrunken shell by the 1958 campaign, he made only one live appearance, an election eve TV broadcast. Even in this re-election film, his lines were minimal.
And you can be certain, as long as I'm in the Senate, I will be in there battling for North Dakota and for the United States of America.
Though winning re-election, he died in office a year later, near the end of a decade, which brought great change to the way politicians communicated. Langer's death coincided with the death of another important figure in North Dakota political history. Once the leader and founding father of the NPL, Arthur C. Townley, by the 1950s, had become a political gadfly. Largely discredited, his political voice unheard, Townley seized upon the national concern for communists in government in his 1956 independent campaign for senator. At one point, he used TV to attack the North Dakota Farmers Union and his opponents.
And now this amazing fact. Communist infiltration, influence, and power has gone so far in North Dakota that the Democrat Party supports the 100% Democrat Farmers Union candidate and the Republican Party supports the 90% Democrat Farmers Union candidate. The communists can't lose unless the Republicans wake up, and wake up fast. Mr. Republican farmer, Republican banker, Republican businessman, do you vote and work Republican with Eisenhower for the Republican Farm Program and against the Farmers Union Soviet? Or do you now still walk hand in hand with the Communist Farmers Union dictators, Communist Democrat Glenn Talbot, Democrat Bill Thatcher, and their willing servant Milton Young, to build this deadly tyranny? If you do, then the jig is up, and the Communist Farmers Union Soviet is here for sure.
Townley was successfully sued by the Farmers Union for libel after this film was broadcast. Though the Farmers Union was unsuccessful in extending judgment to media owners, the case became a landmark test of TV's equal time provisions. Other political figures ranged across the spectrum in the 1950s, some attracting the attention of TV, others not. Three-term Governor C. Norman Brunsdale, a kindly, well-spoken farmer from Mayville, might have felt better without the attention during a Thanksgiving Day hospitalization.
To you people of the television audience, my best wishes for a happy Thanksgiving.
The man who followed Brunsdale as governor is widely acknowledged as one of the best politicians of the 50s at projecting a confident image over TV. McCluskey rancher and banker Republican John Davis, elected in 1956 at the age of 44, became the youngest chief executive in North Dakota history.
Young people took a very active interest in this election, and much credit for getting out the vote must go to the Boy Scouts.
Davis represented a newer generation of politicians who learned how to handle the medium of TV. Only rarely did it occur that the cameras filmed scenes not carefully under control, such as this episode at a 1959 Davis press conference where an opposition party state senator from Mandan, Charles Murphy, caught the governor unprepared.
I made the announcement, and we are all here to announce for this announcement.
We are all here for the purpose of also determining what the training school situation really is. Now, I ask you,
the question,
did you, Mr. Governor, did you or did you not have conferences with members of the legislature secretly before
the question that you're concerned with? I had no secret meetings with anyone.
Do you deny that Senator Erickson stated that you here, that you and he or others with him met in your office?
I can't, Mr. Murphy. It's inconceivable to me that a man with your assumed posture and position of a state senator could inject yourself into this office and be as with such frontage as you're using here right now.
I'm perfectly prepared to defend myself against that charge, Governor. Would you indicate to this press and the people listening here whether or not you approved of this petition, this resolution?
The occasion for this embarrassing encounter was the moment chosen to announce the long-awaited appointment of a successor to the late Senator Langer. A delay in making the interim appointment of former Governor Brunsdale may have led to the perception that Davis was indecisive. His subsequent loss to Democrat Quentin Burdick in a special senatorial election in 1960 ended his career in electoral politics. The Quentin Burdick jump to the U.S. Senate and the rise of two Cass County farmers as political stars, Republican Mark Andrews and Democrat William Guy, represents a watershed, a dividing line between politics of the 50s and later decades. Having been in the House, Guy was one of several in the 1950s whose career would continue after serving in the legislature.
Miss Hoagland,
including acknowledgement of the growing role of women in the legislature, TV had been witness to most of what had been significant in 1950s politics. However, some of the films from the 50s have been lost. All that remains of the explosive March 1960 NPL convention at the Patterson Hotel in Bismarck are scenes of NPL insurgent Buckshot Hoffner getting his annual shearing, and a very brief but tantalizing clip of the beginning of the ruckus that took place when old guard NPLers tried one last time to resist the merger with Democrats. At the end of the decade, the state had returned to a two-party system, and for the most part, the torch of leadership had been passed to a new generation. As with any era, the division was not total. Incumbent GOP Senator Milton R. Young remained in office throughout the decade, gaining a reputation as an advocate of stronger military defense and better federal farm programs.
Great agricultural area is happy to have this new television service. WDAY is to be congratulated for pioneering in the field of television as it did some 30 years ago in the field of radio. I don't know of anything that would be more nicer to a farmer than to have television service in his home, particularly in the long winter nights when there isn't much to do and when the roads are blocked. It will help the farmers to get the news better, to meet the personalities of this nation, and to hear agricultural programs, and will help them in many, many ways. I don't know of anything that would be nicer on the farm. I wish I was back on the farm by myself, and if I was there, I certainly would have a television set.
Agriculture in the 1950s continued on a trend of consolidation and modernization. Farms grew larger, increasing in average size to 755 acres, while the number of farms declined. Farm households received modern conveniences in ever-increasing numbers. Both rural electrification and telephone cooperatives expanded services. New crops appeared, and safflowers, sunflowers, potatoes, and sugar beets all became a significant part of the Red River Valley economy. Livestock patterns also changed. Beef cattle numbers increased, while chickens and horses declined markedly, reflecting the shift from general mixed farming to specialized, highly mechanized farming.
One of the officials just dropped his hat to signal the start of this first heat. 5 tractors involved, and these tractors are driven by Marvin Knapp of Fredonia, Otto Mayer of Ashley, George Obenauer of Ashley, Alan Mitschke of Ashley, and Norman Denning, also from Ashley. They'll come up to these flags up here on the south end of the field, make a turn, and then plow another furrow north on this same field. There they go turning. Hundreds of people are already on hand here at Ashley for this contest. Why don't you make it a point to come on out tomorrow to witness the finals? Get up a party, take the family, come on out to Ashley, North Dakota.
Now, Frank, what field are we in now? What grain is this year? This is barley. And what yield do you expect of it, or don't you know yet? Well, we think it runs around 40 bushels an acre.
The king of crops remained wheat. With the exception of 1953 and 54, North Dakota consistently ranked high among producing states. But the amount of acreage devoted to wheat declined by 1/3 over the decade. Fewer acres, but greater yields, indicating the major farm problem of the 50s, vast surpluses, bin-busting surpluses generated by an exceedingly productive system.
By the end of this fiscal year, it is estimated that there will be in government hands surplus farm products worth about $9 billion.
The surplus created great concern in Washington and a major problem for the Eisenhower administration, and particularly for Ag Secretary Ezra Taft Benson. To deal with the problem, Benson devised a series of proposals calling for flexible price supports and major reductions in acreage allotments. TV watched as Benson tried to sell his plan to farmers in North Dakota.
Again, I emphasize, it is these accumulations that have tended to depress the prices farmers are now receiving. More seriously, these stocks have made necessary the restrictions on production that are now limiting farmers' incomes. We can't afford to raise crops to sell to the government because we are the government. government should conduct a reasonable program providing for price supports, loans, and storage. But these must be within reason.
These ideas aroused vigorous opposition in North Dakota. Not only did the state's congressional delegation rally against them, but the state's major farm organization, the Farmers Union, led the fight to achieve price supports based on either full 100% of parity or at least 90%. 5 national referenda revealed that North Dakota farmers favored high price supports. The end result was a major slippage in farm prices to 60 to 70% of parity. A steady decline in the economic position of farmers as a result of federal farm policies led to the creation of a natural issue for the Democratic NPL party. Beat Benson with Burdick became one of the most popular and successful slogans heard throughout the state in the 1960 campaign. While farming remained the state's largest and most influential industry, new areas of economic potential emerged in the 1950s. The discovery of oil in April 1951 predated the arrival of TV, but it proved what many people had believed for decades, that oil in exploitable quantities existed beneath the prairie sod. The resulting explosion of drilling interest in the Williston Basin brought new industry. It brought jobs, and it brought money to western North Dakota, as this made-for-TV oil industry film illustrated.
Day and night, our little telephone board was lit up like a Christmas tree. Calls from New York, California, Houston. Bit by bit, we began to realize how big a thing this was. A river of cars came pouring in from every corner of the country. The streets and hotels jammed with a stream of newcomers, reflecting all the marvelous, varied cross-weave of America. Every day bringing a new flood of cars. Every train bringing new faces. A construction engineer coming in on a fast express from Cheyenne. A pipe salesman flying up from Tulsa. Trucking outfits and supply companies bringing in everything from 6-inch bolts to storage tanks, riveting guns to road graders. Rig builders and drilling contractors rolling in, ready for work. 100 oil companies racing to get a foot in the doorway, competing for leases, drilling wells across 10,000 square miles of North Dakota and Montana.
By the end of the decade, the oil industry had invested an estimated $650 million in North Dakota. The addition of an oil refinery at Mandan and additional processing and transportation systems were obvious economic benefits. Development of the state's other energy resource, lignite coal, was somewhat overshadowed by the oil boom. The last of the major underground mines had been replaced by the extraction technology of the future, strip mining. In 1952, an electric generating plant constructed at Velva was the first of its kind built near the mine site, beginning a trend that would have major implications for North Dakota in the 1960s and 70s. Perhaps the most spectacular developmental event of the decade was the construction of Garrison Dam, begun in 1947. Authorized as a huge federal flood control effort, the dam on the Missouri River near Garrison was an epic-scale effort in every way. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers shot these color films documenting construction.
The second stage covers the excavation of approximately 20 million cubic yards of material from the intake channel at the top left and the spillway on the right, for placement on the east embankment. The red indicates work completed in 1949, while the dark green indicates the earth placed on the fill in 1950. Drag lines moved in to begin the initial task of clearing bottomland adjacent to the river. Euclid rear dumps and bottom dumps of large capacity haul this material to downstream waste areas. Meanwhile, the Euclid loaders and bottom dumps working high on the eastern bluffs began excavation in the spillway area. The dirt virtually flew as 25-yard ukes were heap-loaded in less than a minute's time. Dirt moving at its best, working around the clock. This huge Euclid fleet has written new chapters in earth-moving history, establishing enviable records that will be a challenge to contractors the world over.
The dedication ceremony in 1953, featuring President Dwight Eisenhower, attracted a crowd of thousands. 3 years after dedication, the first of 5 8-megawatt generators went online, and by 1960, North Dakotans short on nautical experience were attempting to master the recreation possibilities offered by huge Lake Sakakawea, stretching 200 miles upstream to Williston. Constructed at a cost of $294 million, the dam dislocated most of the tribal people on the Fort Berthold Reservation, as well as white ranchers and citizens of 3 towns. Before the rising water made them inaccessible, salvage excavations of numerous archaeological sites yielded much information, resulting in the basis of further learning about early inhabitants along the river. The dam was the first step in a long process, only beginning in the 1950s, calling for construction of irrigation, municipal, and industrial water supply works, diverting Missouri water across the state by a system of canals.
What do you see as the benefits to the state from Garrison and from Oahe?
The Garrison diversion project, of course, is a must if we are to come out of this situation on top. It will contribute direct benefits to the 25 counties within the Conservancy District. There will be numerous indirect benefits that, of course, will be felt by the adjacent counties. It will also broaden the tax base for the state, which, of course, is good.
There's some apprehension, one, and this is why the strategy is so important, about getting it through Congress. And while it may be possible to have it favorably considered by the Senate, it appears, and this is what I'm waiting for this information, that the chairman of the Insular Affairs Committee, which will handle this item, is of the opinion it should not come before Congress this year, and therefore, until that matter has been properly cleared up, the strategy will have to wait until we can find out exactly how this committee is going to feel about it. Because I feel, and I believe the other congressman felt, that it would not be best to have it go through one house and then be lost in another. That we want to, when it's pushed, we want to try to get entire consideration of both houses of Congress.
The huge estimated cost of Garrison diversion, then pegged at $529 million, created its own opposition in Washington. Though North Dakota leaders argued the state deserved the project as compensation for land lost to Garrison and Oahe reservoirs, it remained only a dream as the decade ended.
We're interested in the 2 proposed air bases up here in North Dakota coming into the next couple of years at Minot and Grand Forks. Now, does this
North Dakota had better success with other federal projects. In fact, the federal role, if anything, increased during the 1950s, with special emphasis on defense and preparedness.
Well, just last week, General White, the Air Force Chief of Staff, stated that we could probably expect at least 1 and possibly 2 more generations of manned bombers
And presently, the SAC force is on too few bases with too many airplanes. We have too many eggs in one basket. We would like to put fewer airplanes on more bases. And obviously, the northern part of the United States is much closer to the enemy target systems over the pole than are our bases in the south.
Construction on the bases began in 1956 and 57. Both operational by the end of the decade, they added 10,000 to the state population, and each represented a total investment of $100 million. On another level, the air bases put North Dakotans in sight and in some cases in touch with the American fascination for aviation and rocketry, interests visually attractive to TV.
Rocket and Missile Education Program discussed during the conference concerns just exactly what colleges and universities and public schools can do with the huge outbreak of interest on the part of youngsters and their parents, along with fear on the part of many parents, many educators, and in fact some youngsters. Our concern is to make sure that we comply with local, state, and national policies in missile and rocket education, and at the same time we provide the sound and necessary preliminary information and education that leads to procedures that will help youngsters learn and not be blown to bits.
Each wears a partial pressure suit in case of explosive decompression, also a parachute and crash helmet, normal emergency gear.
The record-making endurance flight, which had one moment of high drama left, has already been counted a great success. It saw, for the first time, the successful transmission of a TV picture from 82,000...
TV itself went to the edge of space, sending back snowy pictures of a man's helmet in a hot air balloon, piloted to a landing near Woodworth, North Dakota, by 2 Air Force flyers.
Did you notice any unusual phenomena while you were up there?
I think for Mel and myself, since we're both meteorologists, the most absolutely delightful occurrence during the flight was flying over a cold front wherein the entire sky beneath us was filled with thunderstorms. The lightning was amazing and impressive and awesome.
The popularity of aviation reflected in TV coverage tends to diminish the importance of other transportation methods. The opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959, in particular, enhanced North Dakota's ability to ship grain directly into the world market, an economic factor far greater than any contribution made by aviation. The continuing influence and importance of railroads as the major mover of goods and produce received little attention unless the system went awry. Cameras almost always recorded the derailments and rail accidents that obstructed and interrupted service.
As of February 1st, the North Dakota Highway Patrol is going to begin strict traffic law enforcement on those who do not have tabs attached to their vehicles. Those who have been operating since January 1st without the 1959 tabs have been in violation of law.
Of all the developments bringing change to society and culture in the 1950s, the automobile was especially important. The love affair with the car was evident everywhere. Along with creating this wheeled, mobile generation, the auto also forced cities and towns in North Dakota to improve, widen, or otherwise develop their streets. The civic parking lot made its appearance. Also developed were services especially related to automobiles. At the same time, there was great progress with improving roads and highways. The initiation of National Defense Highways, another federal project, brought the beginnings of interstate construction near Valley City in 1957. Much more important was the great emphasis on paving the state road system, reflecting the tremendous expansion in the number of private vehicles. By 1960, there were nearly 2 autos registered for every person counted by the census, a figure well above the national average. What stands out in TV's coverage of the rubber-wheeled revolution are the mishaps, the accidents, those startling images from the scene, accompanied by the annual numerical traffic death toll, which continually rose through the 50s. TV news gained an early reputation for siren chasing, showing glimpses of misfortune in various forms, intending to alert and educate unwary citizens as well as keep viewers watching. TV was careful not to serve up too strong a dose of reality. On the other hand, there were times when it was important not to soften news that all was not going well in North Dakota.
I have just returned from a tour through the Standing Rock Indian Reservation, and what I found there is appalling. It's saddening to learn that a once proud people could be reduced to a status of degradation and poverty. The housing is very poor. The clothing of the children, particularly, is not good, and the food supplies are practically non-existent. I found house after house, or shall I say shack after shack, where the only food they had was a small package of cornmeal and sometimes some flour. Milk, fruit, meats, things of that nature were non-existent. I would say the conditions were as bad as I've ever seen in America. Now, there are 2 things necessary to be done. One is these people need some relief at once. As I understand, the Indian Bureau has about $54,000 available for that type of relief. And secondly, we should begin thinking now about rehabilitation and integration as a long-term project. These people want work, and work projects should be provided for them so they can once again assume a place in society and hold their head up.
While Indian reservations remained pockets of poverty, life elsewhere continued modernizing. Every town over 500 population had acquired a modern sewage disposal system by 1960. Major cities were renovating. The term urban renewal was being used as old buildings fell before the wrecking ball. A crowning example of this success was the naming of Fargo as an All-America City by the National League of Cities and Look magazine in 1959.
Last year alone, you and your neighbors, first, passed favorably a $1,900,000 school bond issue. Secondly, you contributed more than $1,200,000 to build a new community youth center. Thirdly, you constructed a $3 million to $4 million flood control project. And fourth, you completed a second municipal swimming pool as a result of a $2.5 million park and recreation levy passed 2 years ago. Furthermore, you, to a very large extent, licked the downtown parking problem as a result of the development of the park and shop, ride-in shop plan motivated by the business people in the downtown area. And of course, you shouldn't forget that you people have repaved and relighted Broadway. You have built new church facilities and new school facilities. You raised last year over $250,000 once again for the United Fund. You people reached a total Parent Teachers Association membership of close to 9,000. And finally, and probably just as important as all the rest, you once again improved the facilities of our Opportunity School. This great story of civic accomplishment belongs to you and each of your neighbors.
At this time of the year, one of the thoughts uppermost in our minds is the safety of the boys and girls as they start back to school.
At the center of both rural and urban social and cultural life during the 1950s was the local school. The decade saw tremendous change in education, including striking growth in the school-age population and a conscious effort to consolidate and improve schools.
Hi, young man.
There's no idea.
How are you?
Fine.
What's your name?
Gary Johnson.
Are you anxious to go back to school, Gary?
No.
No? What are you going to be when you grow up?
First grade.
You're going to be first grade when you grow up? You're going into first grade today, aren't you? I think you said before we went on that you were going to be a policeman. Wasn't that it?
No.
No? I thought you said that. Thank you, Gary, for talking to us. Here we have a very, very nice-looking young lady. Hi there. What's your name?
Kathleen.
Will you come out here just a second, honey, so we can see you just a little bit better? What's your name?
Kathleen.
Kathleen? What grade are you in, Kathleen?
First.
First grade. Thank you very much for talking to us. What are you going to be when you grow up?
I don't know.
You don't know. Say, do all you kids want to go back to school?
The focus of attention at school was often sports. For the television station, the sports announcer had the job of covering and promoting local athletics.
I can assure you this, if and when the situation arises, such as we had last spring, when Bismarck and Bismarck St. Mary's fought for the state Class A basketball championship, KFYR-TV will be on hand to record every historic move.
15 seconds remaining in this Jamestown Devils Lake Consolation Championship game with the score tied 49-49. Jamestown in control of the ball. Joslin and Solis controlling the ball, passing back and this pass back into Hellhart. Back out to Solis, a long shot, and it is good in the very final second of the game. That basket was scored by Solis of Jamestown, and it pulled it out for him 51-49. He shot just as the buzzer sounded, and through it went.
To television may be ascribed, at least partially, the growth in reputation of band leader Lawrence Welk, who became perhaps the North Dakota native known best on the national scene during the 1950s.
Ladies and gentlemen and friends, would you mind if I would call on Joe to sing a song for you? Joe just told me a little while ago, he slept up there at John and Klein's home last night, and he just told me a little while ago that, Lawrence, in all my lifetime, I've never slept like I slept last night. He said, and I feel so good this morning, so naturally I have, I'm doing some wishful thinking that he will sing that way this morning. Joe, would you honor us, please?
An Irish song.
Well, Joe is Irish, and he wanted to know if you'd be willing to listen to an Irish song in this community. I would say they will listen to an Irish song. I fear if you can sing in German, you'll go over better. But let's sing in Irish. Let's, as long as we know you don't sing in German.
Around the world.
How about "Du liegst mir im Herzen"? The world in
By the late 1950s, TV had become society's social and cultural mirror.
Around the world I've searched for you. I traveled on when hope was gone to keep a rendezvous. I knew somewhere, sometime, somehow, you'd look at me and I would see the smile you're smiling now. It might have been in County Down or in New York, in Gay Paris, or even
Social change caught by TV cameras represented a strong example of the medium at its best. Except for when it came to women. TV did not see that society was offering a slowly expanding number of opportunities. The number of women in the state's labor force jumped by 30% during the decade, due primarily to women in the home holding outside jobs. Leading occupations for women were clerical and service jobs. Some occupations remained almost the exclusive province of women during the 50s: food service, elementary school teaching, and medical support jobs. For TV, though, the smiling, camera-shy beauty queen or the visiting celebrity routinely received the airtime. Or TV was busy entertaining with scenes of the unusual, scenes of atypical events of daily life, like the welcome wagon car being retrieved from a plunge in the Red River. For its shortcomings, TV redeemed itself in the 50s by aiding with timely and dramatic information about threats to public safety.
Polio is no longer exclusively a children's disease. In 1954, almost 1/4 of the 3,748 cases of polio in the nation occurred in persons 20 years of age or older. Patients in the older age group usually are more seriously stricken and require a higher concentration of skills to rehabilitate them to a full, useful life.
Members of the 1st District Medical Society want to administer poliomyelitis vaccine as quickly and efficiently as possible in cases where it is needed. To the children in the early grades in school who will receive the vaccine being supplied by the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, this will be a relatively simple matter, with teams of physicians giving their time and services to make the injections, assisted by volunteer workers, nurses, officers of the National Foundation, and local hospitals who will do their part by sterilizing needles and syringes. However, the vaccine will be quite limited in amount in the beginning for administration to other children and adults desiring and needing it. In view of that fact, the 1st District Medical Society feels that grade school children through the 8th grade, who would be approximately up to or through 14 years, should be eligible first, followed by preschool children 1 or 2 years of age or older, and young people in their teens and older. In view of increased susceptibility to poliomyelitis during pregnancy, pregnant women are included in the first group eligible to receive the vaccine. So unless you have children in grade school up to the 8th grade who are not receiving the vaccine in the school clinics, or unless you fall into the latter category mentioned, please do not call your doctor at this time, but wait for announcements in newspapers and over television and radio, which will be inserted by your District Medical Society, letting you know when more vaccine is available.
Perhaps local TV's finest hour occurred during and after the devastating killer tornado that roared through the Golden Ridge area of Fargo on the 20th of June, 1957. Like its journalistic counterpart, the Fargo Forum, which won a Pulitzer Prize for its coverage, WDAY-TV kept the public carefully informed about the tornado and efforts to counter its effects.
These films by WDAY photographer Harry Jennings were taken about 7:30 as the tornado boiled toward Fargo out of the west. The tornado funnel moved at a slow pace, estimated by weathermen as having traveled at speeds of less than 10 miles an hour. The twister struck with all its fury first in the western residential area known as Golden Ridge, blasting many of the houses into an undefinable cloud of dust and debris. From here, the angry storm tore at a large section of Fargo, raging across a part of the northern residential area, then between Golden Ridge and the river. During its course, it ran a zigzag course, narrowing slightly at the river. Altogether, some 100 blocks were affected by the storm. Fire and police officials were on the scene quickly, directing their efforts of the Golden Ridge area. At dawn, a thin fog hung over the city, but the methodical search for victims continued.
When the storm, I could watch the storm coming
And it looked like, to me, like a great big hand had come and was just brushing the things over. I saw chimneys start to go and the roof start coming off the top. Then big hailstones started to hit, and I ducked my head. I grabbed a handful of weeds and clover that were laying there in the ditch.
What happened when the twister hit then, Jerry?
Well, I could feel the twister hit. I could feel the undercurrents, but it didn't actually lift me up or anything like that. But then things began hitting me on my shoulder and arm and legs. Felt like someone was standing there with a club and hitting me.
Well, we thought, along with the Red Cross and the Navy Guard, that everybody had been contacted. But, about 4 o'clock this afternoon, well, a two-man crew found this couple crouching in their water-filling basement, and they hadn't had any food since the tornado had struck. They couldn't understand why nobody had come to see them, and here their house was leveled even with the ground, and nobody ever assumed that there was anybody down in that basement.
There may be other people, other victims of the tornado who do not know about the food center, and it is located on Broadway and 9th Avenue.
That's right.
Plymouth Congregational Church. Thank you very much, John and June. You're doing a wonderful job, and it's a big job to ask them to do. All told, some 1,500 homes suffered damage. This is Golden Ridge from the air. Golden Ridge also is the area where all 10 of those who lost their lives had lived.
TV news films of the 1950s show the events and a good many of the trends that laid the foundation for modern North Dakota society.